There was an article that was recently published in Vox titled, "You Were Probably Eating Way Too Much Protein." And they go on to say that Americans are oddly obsessed with protein, consuming around twice the daily amount recommended in the federal dietary guidelines. They also say that 60% of Americans are trying to increase their protein intake. And they also mention that excessive protein consumption, especially from cholesterol-rich animal-based foods, is correlated with increased risk of cancer and heart disease. And at the end of this study, they also mentioned that excess protein intake is ruining the planet. Now, first of all, let's talk about the protein requirements. So the recommended daily amount of protein is 0.8 grams per kilogram. Now, where did that recommended daily amount come from? Well, that recommended amount is how much on average you need to maintain nitrogen balance, meaning the amount of nitrogen that is being put into your body, in other words, the amount of protein that you're eating versus the amount of nitrogen that is being excreted, and that's usually in the form of urine. If that reaches a net balance of 0, that is called nitrogen balance. And that is where our protein requirements came from. But the problem here is that is not enough protein. Yeah, that's enough to survive, but that's not enough to thrive and be healthy. If you look at this article on nitrogen balance from Science Direct, it says that a positive nitrogen balance is best for anabolism. In other words, for muscle growth, you need to eat more protein. Now, a side note here, the type of protein does make a difference. So if you're getting all of your protein from animal-based proteins, then that's going to be the best clean source of protein. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't still do just fine on plant-based protein, but that just means that you need to eat more of that plant-based protein to get all the benefits from it. And that's the case for a couple of reasons. So the first is the distribution of amino acids in plant-based protein is just not the same. You don't get as much of those key amino acids in plant-based protein when compared to animal-based protein. Also, a lot of the plant-based protein is tied to its roots and its leaves and other sources, so really only about 60 to 70% of the plant protein that you're eating is actually going to your needs. And this is according to protein expert Don Layman, who is also a professor of food science and nutrition. Now, going back to the recommended amount of protein being at 0.8 grams per kilogram, this is honestly a joke. Now, how do we know that the RDA right now of protein isn't enough? Because we have actual studies on it. And we have specific studies showing that when you increase protein consumption in humans, that they actually benefit from it. In general, the studies show that the more protein people eat, the better. Let's look at this study. This is a large prospective study called the Healthy Aging and Body Composition Study, or the Healthy ABC study. And they had more than 2,000 elderly subjects. They found that the people that ate the most amount of protein over this 3-year period, which happened to be about 18% of their total calories, kept significantly more lean mass compared to the groups that did not have as much protein. The reason this is important is because as you age, you start significantly losing muscle and losing muscle strength. This is something called sarcopenia. In this case, the group that had the lowest amount of protein lost about 40% more of their lean muscle mass compared to the high protein group. Now, this is really important because your muscle strength is one of the best indicators we have for how long you will live and also how healthy you will live. And the thing is, even studies that show that when you slightly increase your protein consumption over the RDA, then you still can benefit by limiting your amount of muscle loss as you age. This study also found that when you give frail elderly people a protein supplement, it significantly improves their lean body mass composition. So they had 2 groups that were doing resistance training for 6 months. One of the groups was just eating like normal. This was the placebo group. And the other group was given a protein shake to supplement. The placebo group in this study, after 6 months of working out, did not gain any lean muscle. But the group that was given the protein shake gained about 3 pounds of lean muscle mass on average. And this isn't the only study showing this. There are plenty of studies showing very similar results, that when you increase your protein consumption, then your muscle mass and muscle strength goes up. And the thing is, it isn't just about your muscle. Protein can also improve your metabolism. So this study was comparing people that had a normal diet versus giving elderly people a protein supplement that has essential amino acids in it. The group that was given the protein supplement was able to lower their levels of liver fat and also their circulating triglycerides. Now, you might be wondering, why did I pick out studies that specifically focus on the elderly? Well, The number one nutrient that people lack in as they get older is protein. And most studies show that as you get older, you actually need to continually increase your protein intake to help combat that sarcopenia we talked about. And this is why protein is so important. Protein is different from foods like carbohydrates and fat because protein isn't a primary source of energy. We do not rely on protein to make energy like we do carbs and fat. We also store protein differently. If our excess protein can't get converted into muscle, then it's going to get excreted in our urine. Also, the different amino acids that make up protein aren't just for muscle. They're also the building blocks for a lot of hormones in our body. It's also important for our immune system, growing healthier skin, healthier nails, and healthier hair. We also have to get 9 out of 20 of these amino acids in our diet because our body cannot produce them on our own. Now, going back to this Vox article to say that consuming more protein is going to increase your risk of heart disease and cancer, I think is thrown way out of proportion. If you look at the percentage of calories, people have just been eating more in general, but specifically the percent of protein that they're eating has stayed the same. So in other words, people are eating more processed foods and junk foods in general. It's not the fact that the protein that they're eating is causing the problem. The fact is that they're eating more in general and more crap in general. But if you look at lean sources of protein, that is not the problem because all the evidence points to the opposite. So actually, I think people should be focusing on eating more protein because the more protein that you eat, the healthier that you will be. Now, can you eat too much protein? Well, obviously, yes, too much of anything is going to be bad for you. But for the vast majority of people, you will not be eating too much protein because you really have to try and go out of your way to eat too much protein. The upper limit of protein consumption is more than 3.7 grams per kilogram or 1.7 grams per pound. So if you're a 170-pound person, that's about 289 grams of protein in a day. Now, ideally, I think you should be targeting about 2 to 3 times the recommended daily amount of protein. So instead of 0.8 grams per kilogram a day, shoot for a gram per pound a day or 2.2 grams per kilogram a day. That is still well short of the upper limit of protein consumption. But the thing is, you don't want to start adding your whole calories in general, especially if you're trying to lose weight. It would be better to instead change your percentage of calories, like cut out some of your carbs and fat and start increasing your protein consumption to get to that higher amount of protein. Now, going back to this article from Vox, I think it's honestly doing more harm than good because it's really only showing part of the picture. I think the true agenda they had was that protein and eating too many animal foods will hurt the environment. Now, that's a separate discussion. But to claim that it's going to increase your risk of heart disease and cancer and that people are eating too much protein is just flat out wrong. Now, do you really need to go to the dentist and get your cleaning done every 6 months, or is it just a scam? Come on, just be honest with me. Look, I get it. Life can get super busy and it can be super expensive. I mean, my Chipotle bowl was like almost $15 the other day. What happened to it being $6.80? Do you really need to spend the time